Hello, my name is Elisa Rubenstein. This is Podcast 5, more on the subject of how African slavery is so antithetical to American philosophies. Our American presidents Harry Truman, Franklin Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy, along with his brother Robert Kennedy, worried greatly about the colonialist and imperialist movements of European and Russian governments into native lands in other countries, particularly into the lands of agrarian people, where they plundered lives and nature's riches of these lands to enrich their own pockets. This author has learned that, incredibly, the African slave trade, which came about from such colonialist and imperialist movements, brought about enough wealth for the British to fund their industrial revolution of the 1800s in Midlands, England. This revolution that turned agricultural and production methods into mechanized and industrial schemes, and that now enriches all modern prosperous economies with goods and services and foods now available to so many populations in luxury amounts, came from the unpaid labor of English slaves. Unbelievably, those whose labor paid for our gifts do not reap these same rewards in their homeland. The reason is the souls of Africa are the children of those that the European slave traders plundered to enrich their wealthy nations. American presidents rebelled against the injustices of European and Russian colonialism in agrarian lands, and this stance was historically always a major force in U.S. governmental foreign policy. Indeed, the United Nations and the League of Nations play an enormous role, still fighting the injustices of colonialism and imperialism abroad, and unfortunately with mixed results. Europeans have felt the God-given right to discover and subjugate native peoples throughout the globe since the times of the Roman Empire. The virulence of those behind the colonialistic and imperialistic ways of life, indeed, have been behind the assassination of American leaders, may have been behind the assassination of American leaders who fought so hard against those endeavors. Just as Abraham Lincoln may have been assassinated for ending slavery in the U.S., so may the Kennedy brothers have been sacrificed to the prejudice and enslavement of Africa as well as other agrarian peoples, and enrichment that came along with that attack could continue on uninterrupted. When one studies the life experience of African peoples, one sees a large disparity between the enrichment the collective modern world enjoys versus the poverty, disease, famine, crime, and belittlement the people of Africa experience. Their enslaved souls were used to such a degree during slavery that the funds earned from their bodies being harnessed to fuel our every desire led to an income for the white population of England, to name just one nation, so high that it was able to fund the era of mechanization of the workplace that now guides the economies of all modern nations in every corner of the world. Even today, colonialist and imperialist tendencies hurt Africa, where very wealthy Western corporations take root to enrich themselves from the African riches of their soil, which now in many places in the African continent does not bear fruit. In the following paragraphs, please see the words of Robert Kennedy, who spoke of the need to bring about world change against European and Russian takeover of agrarian lands in a, quote, Day of Affirmation, unquote, speech he gave in Cape Town, South Africa on June 6, 1966. Quote, "There is," said an Italian philosopher, "nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. First is the danger of futility, the belief there is nothing one man or one woman can do against the enormous array of the world's ills, against misery and ignorance, injustice and violence. Yet many of the world's greatest movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man. Give me a place to stand," said one Greek philosopher, "and I will move the world." Each time a man stands up for an ideal, or acts to improve the lot of others, or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope, and crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring those ripples to build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. President Kennedy, when weighing youthful idealism against pragmatic reality, stated that the most profound feelings of young people around the world, their idealism, high aspirations, and deep convictions, are not incompatible with the most practical and efficient of programs. Of course, to adhere to standards, to idealism, to vision, in the face of immediate dangers takes great courage and takes self-confidence. But we also know that only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. So too, in the life of the honorable and the good, it is they who act rightly who win the prize. For the fortunate among us, there is a danger of comfort, the temptation to follow the easy and familiar path of personal ambition and financial success so grandly spread before those who have the privilege of education. But that is not the road history has marked for us. There is a Chinese curse that says, may he live in interesting times. Like it or not, we live in interesting times. They are times of danger and uncertainty, but they are also more open to the creative energy of men than any other time in history. President John Kennedy also spoke of the need for all nations, large and small, modern or agrarian, to be free to govern themselves. When speaking of youthful idealism and the path of youth on all shores to bring betterment to all lives equally, he stated, "The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it, and the glow from that fire can truly light the world." Then he added, "With a good conscience, our only sure reward, with history the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead the land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth God's work must truly be our own." It is important, unquote. It is important that we heed the words of our past leaders now. The movements of European and Russian Chinese colonialism and imperialism are very prevalent today, and these horrifying time-held government programs do not just cause ruination of other cultures and their ability to sustain themselves, but also run counter to environmentalist and conservationist fears of raiders who plunder the planet as a whole with disregard for our future and for the sake of personal enrichment. Just examine African soil as an example. It has been ripped of all minerals so that now large swaths of Africa cannot even grow food to eat. Examine the South American rainforests that provided a huge ecosystem and many habitats that were the home of numerous animal species and a human population that lived by agrarian philosophies. The catastrophic result of plunder there has led to so many ecological calamities on our planet, all of which many people across the globe are desperately trying to solve. Indeed, the terrifying condition known as desertification on Earth, causing desperate condition now in northern Africa and China, where the Sahara Desert and Gobi Desert terrorize indigenous populations with dangerous environs, is directly related to the consumeristic tendencies of imperialistic and colonialistic governments who rob the land of simpler peoples. Deforestation may have begun at the hands of the Roman Empire, when these people raided the North African forests for the enrichment the gifts of the forest provided, leaving behind a mountainous region of pure sand with no rainfall or vegetation to feed man or animal available. In addition, it is documented that the Russian presence in China led to a calamitous effect on their Gobi Desert when the Russians in the 1960s cut away all of the native grasslands, which housed much moisture in favor of growing of crops in those areas. Also, the Russians built an intricate irrigation system from rivers near the Gobi to attach to households throughout the area. This, along with the cutting away of the ancient grasses, led to a severe drying out of the Gobi and accelerated the pace of desertification in China by 500 to 800 square kilometers from the 1970s up until the 1990s. Trees are important for many, many reasons, and not just for being water sinks that hold moisture and that have a cooling effect on the climate. Trees also are always performing the work of photosynthesis on Earth, absorbing sunlight into their leaves, and then, due to a series of chemical reactions caused from the light entering the leaves, producing simple sugars and carbohydrates, our first food sources. The photosynthetic reactions also cause the leaves to ingest carbon dioxide and release into the air pure oxygen in its place. This is powerfully important for control of pollution. Additionally, the source of most products that people use in their daily lives for need or enjoyment come from trees. For example, from trees, these products are generated, to name some: our homes and buildings, asphalt for roads, energy for electricity, paper, ink, toys, medicines, methane, rubber, oils, sugars, nuts, fruits, paint, adhesives, pencils, crayons, and gum. From this author's studies, there seems to be a sad correlation between the horrifying experience of desertification on our planet and the loss of trees and all the negative impacts that surround those occurrences and the movements of colonialism and imperialism. This shows evidence that substantiates the worries of our presidents that colonialists and imperialists would take away the power of agrarian people to enrich their own pockets. The agrarian nations of Africa and certainly South America, both proven to have been hurt by European colonialists, and the agrarian sectors of China, hurt by the Russians who moved there, show clearly how a more powerful government moved into areas where indigenous populations existed, albeit with less economic and political power, and took away the riches of their lands to fuel economies in faraway places. This phenomenon, long abhorred by the American agenda, has proven that, if continued, it can deprive the earth of its precious ability to sustain its life. The sites for this article are Wikipedia, the Internet Dictionary, in relation to definitions of Raubwirtschaft and science policy, Calamity Calling, Waterless World, China's Ever-Expanding Desert Wasteland, Global Post, December 16, 2013, by Benjamin Carlson, and Europe's African Pillage, Trumpet.com, Trumpet Print Edition, July 2000, by Gareth Fraser. Thank you.